Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman, and we're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Lance, good to see you. John Reosti calling in from an undisclosed location. John, are you on the line?
I am.
Hey, there you are. Merry Christmas to you. Good to hear you. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
This is, I'm going to turn it over to you, John. You want to talk about what Bank of America is doing, their small business checkpoint? I was glancing at this. Good stuff. Go ahead, John. What's going on with Bank of America?
Well, I would say it's a big time small business lender. They publish a lot of research into small business lending, and I thought this was very interesting. It's an end of the year sort of wrap up and assessment of the state of small business, and there were a number of points in there. But the one that I thought was very interesting was the fourth point on that list, and that's alternative lending. It noted that sort of two very interesting trends. One, that banks and are tightening their lending standards, depository lenders, one might say, in the face of expected tougher economic conditions. But that small businesses are not yet reporting any difficulties accessing credit or significant difficulties. And the obvious thought there is where are they getting the credit if it's not as much as forthcoming from banks, and the answer being alternative lenders. All kinds of alternative lenders were mentioned in that. Some were private equity and some were other private small business lenders, non-bank small business lenders, online lenders. And that's it's a very interesting conclusion. It's a very interesting trend. And one of the things that it could mean is that banks small businesses are perhaps paying more for that credit, because generally the credit they get from banks, and certainly the credit they get from SBA, is less expensive.
John, help me out with the definitions. Alternative credit, how does that differ from a fintech lender?
I think it is. I think it would be a fintech. I think you have your finger on it. When they say alternative, they mean alternatives to banks. Banks, I guess in the case of SBA, they probably mean specifically banks, but generally you might widen that, say, non-depository lenders, and add credit unions as well. But certainly banks, which have been, historically, I guess, the number one source of small business credit.
What they're saying under this, that the larger banks, well, I guess as well as the smaller banks, is overall bankers, traditional banks, are tightening their credit.
Yeah.
But I know we're going to follow up your report with a story by PayNet that says actually small business lending is up. So one of the problems with the Great Recession was there was no regulation of these lenders. Are we seeing a repeat in 2024, John?
I don't know if we're seeing a repeat. I think there's a lot more attention that's been paid over the last 10 years, and I certainly don't think we'll see a repeat of the excesses or anything like that. But I just think it's having said that, it's just a fact of nature, since banks can get their money and lend it at lower rates, that when businesses are going to sources other than banks, they're just going to pay more. They're not. That doesn't mean they're being gouged, and that doesn't mean there's excessive profits. It just means that the cost of credit is higher.
Lance, I know you're the boots on the ground, and one of the things that we consistently see is with a small business entrepreneur, if they can get the money tomorrow at a higher rate or wait 2 weeks and get an SBA loan, they're going to opt for that higher rate and put the money in the bank tomorrow.
Yeah, cash is king for small businesses, and I can't tell you how many times I've had an SBA loan that I was servicing, and maybe they're hitting a rough spot, and you get an updated financial statement, and they have a some sort of loan from an online lender or an alternative lender, as John has mentioned, and all of a sudden that loan is killing them because of the high interest rates. And some of these alternative lenders, instead of having a regular monthly payment, take weekly pulls from their business checking account, which can be difficult for small businesses. So, absolutely, a lot of small businesses, they don't necessarily have the patience to wait, and they look at these alternative sources. I mean, I see it all the time, guys. I have I file a Schedule C, and I get these emails and letters from these companies that says we can have as much as $100,000 to you in less than 24 hours. So small businesses find that attractive, getting money quickly.
Lance, what I know it's a handful, but overall, do you see that as a factor, that high financing as a contributing factor in the failure of the loans that you're working out?
I think it certainly plays a part, because, again, they hit a rough spot and they jump out and get one of these online loan or alternative loans at a higher interest rate with a more aggressive payment structure than, say, a SBA Express revolving line of credit would offer. But, they feel the need, they need the money now, not 4 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now. And it does cause problems with small business owners.
Lance, how difficult is it for the SBA lender to refinance those loans?
You absolutely can refinance it. And the key, Bob, is catching it early on. Getting your monthly or getting your financial statements from the small business. If you find one of these alternative lending sources, you certainly want to ask some questions. What's the rate? What are the payment terms? Because you can refinance debt that's on unreasonable terms with an SBA loan. And one of the great solutions you might offer your small business is, I know you got in a hurry and you need the money now, but let us roll this into an SBA loan and give you some reasonable payment terms.
Very good. John, with respect to, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead, John. Bail me out. Make me.
Let me jump in and refer back to that report a little bit. The report was generally optimistic, saying that exiting 23 and entering 24, small businesses are in pretty good shape. But the one, they mentioned that, they highlighted this trend towards alternative credit, or potential trend. But I guess the one source of concern in that, if you look at it, was rising costs. Yeah. And those rising costs, certainly there are rising labor costs, but generally, hopefully those are being offset by increased or improved productivity. But then you have other rising costs that are rising along with the cost of labor that might be a cause for concern down the road. And I imagine the cost of credit is in there. And
yes.
If you add that into the mix with more labor costs and other higher costs, just like Lance said, you could see problems.
Well, and the greatest New Year's gift or Christmas gift small business could get is for the Fed to drop interest rates next year, like they're talking about.
Yeah. John, my train is in the station. Okay, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this chart, Exhibit 8, and we'll make this available for everyone. According to this chart, alternative lenders are the number one source of capital for small businesses. It shows 30%, and that's up on a percentage basis quite a bit, on a little 26% from last year. So number one are alternative lenders. Number two are institutional lenders. And then number three, we have credit unions, 4 small banks, and 5 big banks. Credit unions are a little flat. And tell me, we haven't talked about them. Tell me how they're doing in this niche.
Well, I think number one, credit unions, as a result of the legislation in I think it was 1998 that sort of overhauled their field of membership rules. One of the things, the offsets that the credit union industry agreed to at the time was a member business lending cap. And also the name, the amount excludes me, but I think it's about, it caps their potential for business lending. And I'm sorry, I don't want to even venture to say, but it's at a relatively low amount, like less than 30% of a loan portfolio, or well under that. I think closer to 12.25%, I think. So they have to, exist within this cap, and it makes it very tough because, those that are close to the cap sometimes can't extend loans or do things that their clients want, and the clients go elsewhere. And so I think the word handicap is not so bad when you talk about the ability of a lot of credit unions to do business lending.
That's why
said,
go ahead.
One of the things that does not count towards the cap is the guaranteed portions of SBA loans.
Yeah.
So, there's an avenue for credit unions to do more. But at the same time, credit union participation in SBA has always been relatively low, and it remains so. It remains that way in 2023 and into 2024, despite, I think, pretty strong efforts on the part of SBA and also on the part of NCUA to encourage more credit union participation. And I wonder about that. I thought, Lance might have some opinions on that, but I wonder how much the difficulty of sort of staffing up an SBA department, the expense, and just the difficulty of finding people, just that sort of weighs on credit unions that might want to do more SBA lending.
Well, credit unions, of course, there's been growth in credit union small business lending, but it's not what you think it would be. Credit unions, right, like other SBA lenders, there's something called CUSOs, credit union service organizations, right, that assist them with SBA lending. They can partner with lender service providers also. But I think one of the big impediments is, even though SBA has done a number of things to simplify the lending process, it's still a challenging process. And for a credit union to fully participate in SBA lending, they're going to either have to have a connection with a CUSO or a LSP, or they're going to have to hire skilled staff to do it. So, but I think credit union lending growth in the SBA space can happen as long as we have good, strong LSPs and CUSOs supporting them.
Mike, I'll bring up the box, the National Credit Condition. There we go. Thank you very much. John, this is from PayNet, which is division of Equifax. We've had Sarah on several times. In fact, Anna, make a note. Let's get Sarah on after the first of the year. The first chart is the Small Business Loan Index, and so that ties in what Bank of America is saying, John, that lending is up 6.3% over the last year, and it is centered in that alternative credit. But they go one step further, and they're showing that delinquencies are going to go up 1.7%. Oh, I'm sorry, they are up. To Lance's heart, defaults are up 100 bips, or up to 2.85, and the outlook is that's going to increase to 3%. Lance, first of all, do you think that's their data is accurate?
Well, I think there's some accuracy in it. Anybody who has much of an SBA portfolio is experiencing borrowers who are challenged right now because, their payment amounts that they originally planned to dutifully take care of have in some cases almost doubled. So I think there's going to be more defaults in 2024. Now, if the Fed will jump on it and bring rates back down, and there's plenty of discussion that, they're talking about 2, 3, possibly 4 rate decreases. How many, Bob? 3?
Well, I'm not going to bet on it.
But interest rates need to come back a little bit. we all talk about when I first started SBA lending, I did an SBA loan at 21.5%. Well, I don't have a loan in my portfolio that could make their payments at 21.5%. But when they were 21.5%, those businesses, the business plan, the projections were based on that. They were not based on 10% and suddenly it became 20% or 21.5, which that's what our small businesses experience. They, most of them had a 6.5%, 6.25%, 6.5% rate. Now it's 11%. So,
John, my question to you is, with these stats where we're showing loan is increasing and defaults are increasing, the question therefore are rates. And with those increasing rates, how much of the charge that they're charging the borrower, that they're baking in the expected defaults? So are these interest rates from these alternative credit sources, are they exorbitant in your opinion?
No, I mean,
you
have to do that on a case by case thing. I don't think so, but I think what has to, you have to look at why they're more expensive, and it's just that they can't obtain money at the rates the banks can. There's just a significant advantage, which is why probably bankers aren't necessarily terrified by the fact that right now alternative lenders are the number one source of credit, because hopefully next year when rates go down, there will be some modifications, and people will be able to banks will be able to sort of loosen the purse strings, which is not the case now. They'll be able to take a little bit more liberal approach to lending. But I wouldn't necessarily say they're exorbitant. No.
Well, I think this is fascinating because on one hand, we have the increase in the lending. On the other hand, we're projecting and we have higher defaults and projecting higher defaults. So something is going to have to give. Hey, Mike, I'll bring up the next slide. And this is interesting in terms of a geographic footprint. This is, again, the outlook. This is the current delinquency index as of October 23. Green, good, red, bad. And I know there was one chart, Lance, where Arkansas was the only green state, and they're going orange on us.
They've gone orange on us, and Middle America appears to have significant delinquencies. Can't exactly tell you why that is, other than, like I said, I think across the country, the rate increases that we've experienced have made it difficult on small businesses.
Yeah.
I know they were necessary to get inflation under control, and inflation is now appears to be under control, but they certainly have challenged small business.
Oh, very good. Anyway, fascinating stuff. I hope we didn't lose you too much in the weeds with our stats. We all love the stats and the numbers. You go to our website, we have this chart, we have the other one. We'll hold off on this, Michael. It's 20 after. I don't want to go too much. Quick nod to TD Bank, good for them, New York. And Lance is going to have right for the first of the year, preparing the new universal purchase package. We will be on only 2 more times in 2024, both Fridays. This Friday and a week from Friday, we'll be off on the following 2 Mondays. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, an entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great week.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Lance.